The Brooklyn Vegan Show is a podcast about music brought to you by the music blog and online record store Brooklyn Vegan. Make sure to subscribe to hear all of our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with musicians and more, and find us 24/7 at brooklynvegan.com, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hey, welcome to the new episode of the Brooklyn Vegan Show. I'm BV editor Andrew Sacker, and today's episode is a conversation with David Knudson, guitarist for Botch, Minus the Bear, newly a solo artist, and more. This conversation was recorded not long after Botch released 122, their first song in over 20 years. It is a killer song. It's a bonus track on the new Sargent House reissue for We Are the Romans. If you haven't heard it, you should go stream that, pick up the record, whatever you need to do to hear it, because it finds Botch in killer form, and it's really, really exciting to have them making new music. Even if it's the only reunion we're going to get out of Botch, because as Dave does say on the episode, there really are no plans for tours or anything, but he also says never say never. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, because a Botch show would be epic to say the least. Dave also has, played for many years in Minus the Bear, who unfortunately broke up back in 2018. Feels like just yesterday, partially because the band's kept going. They have a live record that came out in 2021, which is really awesome. And they're always active on social media. They're always repressing stuff. And there's also been a lot of anniversaries in the Minus the Bear world recently. Planet of Ice turned 15 this year. Highly Refined Pirates about to turn 20. We talk a lot about Highly Refined Pirates on the episode with the anniversary coming up. And David has his debut solo record out now. It is called The Only Thing You Have to Change Is Everything. And I think if you like Minus the Bear and you haven't heard this record, you would definitely like this record. Jake Snider, the singer of Minus the Bear, sings on it, and even the songs that Jake's not on really sound like Minus the Bear. Not to say that David doesn't do his own thing. He absolutely does. But I think if you appreciate his work in Minus the Bear, you'll find this is sort of a natural progression for him. It's a really great record. So yeah, here's my chat with David Knudson. All right, well, hey Dave, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me. Excited to chat about some stuff.
Yeah, totally. I've been looking forward to this. It should be a lot of fun. What are you up to at the moment?
Well, let's see. It's it's supposed to be school's supposed to be back for Seattle, but the teachers are striking, so now no one's back at school, which makes things a little more difficult. But understand why teachers want to feel like they're compensated correctly. So hopefully it'll end soon. But that's about it. Other than that, just working in the studio and just continuing to write music, because why not?
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you've been really sort of busy lately. I mean, you got a new solo record out, new Botch song. You've been doing all those videos, like the guitar playthrough videos with the old Minus the Bear and Botch songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot going on for someone who is not in a band at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of knew that this year would be would be pretty busy, and it's been super exciting. Like, obviously, the solo LP came out in May, and I've been working on that for a while. And after Minus the Bear ended back in 2019, God, I can't even remember, it so long ago, but it feels like it was yesterday. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do and just recover from that whole, not even just final tour, but just the entity and the band that was Minus the Bear, and kind of move on to the next phase of my life. So it feels nice to have everything coming to fruition all this year with the solo LP and the Botch song, which was written about in the press release, was kind of a byproduct and a happy accident of working on the solo LP, because I feel like a lot of the material fits real well on the solo LP, but that song was such an outlier that there was no way to cram that onto that solo LP, right? And as soon as you get Dave and Brian or any one of those guys involved, it automatically just shifts what that song is and what it means and what it should, what what artist I guess it should be released under. So, but yeah, it feels good this year to have a lot of stuff happening. So
Totally. And yeah, I know you had kind of said like you said in the press release, it's like you were writing that song, the pandemic had hit, you were like, I got to do something heavy, and then you're just like, oh, let me call Dave and have him do vocals, and then just spirals from there. So like, can you give like a little more background on how then the rest of the band got involved and
sure.
how it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so literally, it was like, I mean, this was a while ago. This was probably like, I mean, this was over a year ago. I think more like spring of 21, when I was like really heavy into writing stuff. And at that point, like like the whole work from home thing, like being here with my wife, who I love my family to death, but it's like you're stuck in a place with them and you can't do a whole lot, and you feel like the walls are closing in, and it just it gets kind of like suffocating. Um and so that's really where like the desire to do something more like riff heavy and just heavy in general sort of happened. And like, so a lot of times I would escape down to the studio, and whether I was trying to write brand new songs or work on songs that were already going to be on the record, or I wrote the whole thing pretty much Skyping with Sam from the UK, Sam Bell, the producer for the solo LP. I would come down here and just plug in and kind of like let loose and see what happens. And so yeah, so that song just kind of like it. A lot of times when I'm writing songs, I'm upstairs on the couch with an acoustic guitar, and I'm not plugged into anything, or I just have an electric guitar that's not plugged in, and that's how I write. And then I come down here and work on something. But that song, it was just I immediately plugged in and the riffs just popped out of my hands, and it was just one of those moments where um like everything lined up, and the song was born in an instant. And then I made a rough demo, and then I sat on it for a little bit, and I was like, what's going to happen with this, because I feel like it's really cool. I who would be a good singer to have on this, because at that point in time I was working with Jake from Minus the Bear on his song, and Bayonne on his song, and trying to brainstorm collaborators. And I was like, I mean, I just got to send this to Dave and see what he says. So I sent it over to Dave, and he was like, I can't wait to do this. Like, I don't know what this is going to be. And that was kind of like the vibe for everyone, was like, we don't know what this is going to be, but let's just have fun, because I think everyone felt the same way about being in quarantine and the pandemic. And so everyone was just kind of like, I don't know, just ready to do something creative together. And so then from there, got in touch with Brian and Tim, and they were all on board. And we hadn't really all spoken in a while, um, you know, as a band. Like, I'll talk to each of them individually, but this was like the first time we've really, spoken to each other as a band in a while. So it felt nice to be back together with everyone. And then, people just crushed their parts, and it became that song. And it's kind of a one of the I guess bright spots of the pandemic. Is this whole like being able to collaborate with people remotely, and or like share ideas remotely, or just like bringing people together that hadn't hung out in a while. So if the pandemic did anything that was remotely not good, but if you're looking for a silver lining, then stuff like this, I think, is one of those moments where, hey, at least we got this weird Botch song out of
For
it.
sure. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, a lot of musicians I've talked to, I just have these, silver lining pandemic stories where it's like, oh,
Totally.
like we got to spend a month on our album and normally we'd get a week or something like that. And,
Yeah, it's totally a running theme with like all sorts of creative people. I feel like, and it's
hmm
cool that people were able to like continue to be creative in the midst of this like world event that was changing so many things for people.
yeah, I mean, it's like you had to find something to do or you'd like go insane.
Yeah, I know, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, like when it came down to calling it a botch song, I mean, you have the song with Jake on your record. It's not a Minus the
Mhm.
Bear song. I know Brian has sort of talked a lot on social media. I think he's a bit hesitant to like refer to Botch as a reunited band. So
No,
like you had
absolutely, and I mean, the band is not reunited, so it's
right.
like it's not it's a Botch song, but it's not like It's not like we called each other up and we were like, let's write a Botch song. It was purely like, you know, I think I wrote this in the Instagram reel. It was just like sometimes shit happens and you just roll with it. It was just like one of those things where it's like, we didn't expect this to happen, but let's just see let's just go with it and see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's a great song. People seem to really like it. It feels so exciting to have a Botch song in the world in 2022.
Yeah,
But like,
thanks, man.
did you think at all about like you had to know there's some baggage if we call this a Botch song?
Oh, sure. But I don't think there was any way to call it anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could have like formed some silly new band name or something, but it was like, like it was the four of us doing what each of us individually does. And so it only made sense to call it a Botch song, right? And I think the timing, one of the other things that I think, um, like kind of like pushed it in the Botch direction apart from it just, Botch has only had four members, right? There's been no other members except for the four of it. It's not like we had a replacement bass player or a new singer or a new drummer or anything like that, right? It's always been the four of us. So I think whenever something that's just the four of us, whenever that would have ever happened or never happened, like it's just that's what Botch is, right? And I think I forget when it was, but when Hydra had officially folded, and all the masters and whatever were given back to the artists, and we were talking to Sargent House, and then um, that whole thing was announced. I think we saw it as an opportunity to maybe do something cool for the re-release of Romans, which is obviously like the I think the record that kind of like defined our band. And so it felt like a cool moment to be able to like let's like when we were touring, and like Botch got way more popular after we played our last show, which is which is always kind of funny to think about. And it was like kind of a cool way to like maybe let's we love this new song we did. Let's add it to Romans when we re-release it and kind of like give it a because that record still sounds modern, at least to my ears. So let's give it an even more. Let's still update it to 2022 kind of vibe.
For sure. And now I know, like you said, Botch isn't reunited. You did the video though. How did it feel to like play in a room with those guys again?
Yeah, that was honestly like I think everyone was a little apprehensive about what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything else up to that point, was pretty much done remotely and independently. But it was amazing to like be in the room. I mean, it was like seeing your four old friends that you used to like crack jokes with and give each other shit. It was just immediately just like, "What's up, dudes? How you doing?" Sure, time has passed and all that stuff, but it was really fun. Like the video, we didn't. Dmitry Ludeman, who did the video, did the like the visualizers and animations for my record, and I knew he was a longtime Botch fan, so I figured he did such a great job. Let's I'll ask him to do it, and he jumped at the chance. And originally it was going to be like kind of an animation type thing, right? And it was going to be maybe use like archival footage, and there was no plan to like have us in the video. We just wanted to have some sort of visual element, right, to like accompany the song. And so he was like, that could be cool. And he was like, but what are the chances, I could fly up from the Bay Area and you guys could just like get in a room. And so I was like, I'll reach out to the other guys, but I don't know if it's really going to happen. And then everyone was on board. Everyone was excited about doing it. We were about to do it. And then he called me and he was like, I got COVID. I can't come up and do the video anymore. And so after all this, it was like, oh shit. But then ultimately, the day before Brian left for a Sumac tour, the stars aligned and he tested negative. He flew up, shot the video, flew out the same day, and it was just like done in a heartbeat. It happened so quickly. It was like the video was really fun, but it was like only took like 3 or 4 hours. Threw up the lights, had my buddy Ron there helping to like grip an assistant direct or whatever, and banged out the song like a bunch of times, and it was that. So yeah, the video was really fun to do, and it was great being with everybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like, you guys were rocking out like the old days. I mean, it looked a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I haven't played a show since the last Minus the Bear show, which was in 2018, right? And like the next day, I legitimately had a bangover from like, the neck was like killing me right here after the day after the video. So
Awesome.
yeah.
um, so I know, like, again, Brian has sort of said a lot on social media. He has sort of said, like, for him, he got closure with Botch. There was no unfinished business, but for some other members, there was. How do you feel?
I mean, I love the way that the band ended. I feel like the last show at the Showbox in 20 or 2002. God, so long ago. Don't even know how to say those years anymore. Um, that last show in '02 was really amazing, and it was a perfect. It was a great way to go out. Like I meant, and I have, so that chapter was closed for me for so long because the band ended, and then Minus the Bear happened, and so I was able to like perform and play music with those guys, in that band for so long. So I mean, I don't know. There's, we're not talking about anything. We're not, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the future. There was never any talk of doing a new Botch song. So I don't think any of us will say never, but we're not planning on anything. So
For sure.
yeah.
Well, maybe in 20 more years, we'll get a second new Botch song.
Right. Yeah. We can always look forward to that.
Yeah.
Or the next time I write a solo record, I'll try to focus on having some heavier riffs too.
hmm
Just it'll be undeniable.
How do you feel in general about like when bands do reunion tours? Is it something you like, something maybe have feelings against?
I mean, I got to say, I was so bummed that I couldn't go to the Drive Like Jehu reunion when that happened back in like 16 or something, like, because I never got a chance to see them, and that was like those records were like my guitar, were like just I worshiped them. You know what I mean? Like those pieces of vinyl got so much play in my apartments and college and all that stuff. Like I love Jehu so much, so I was bummed I missed that. Like I can't wait to go see Unwound in February. Like I saw Unwound probably 20 times, but I still can't wait to see them one more time. So I think if the band, I don't know, I think the pandemic has, it's, everyone's talking about how no one listens to new music anymore, or it's harder to get music fans to listen to that, and people are so nostalgic for old stuff. I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know how much of that is true, or if those are just articles that I read on the internet or whatever, but
Right.
I do feel like the internet also said that compact discs were coming back, and I made those for my solo record, and no one's buying them. So,
Right.
uh, so I don't know how true that is either, right? But uh, but I think it's, I think people are longing to have these experiences from the past, right? And so I think these reunion tours are kind of fulfilling that. I think that, as long as people's expectations are real, it's not like you're going to get a 25-year-old Unwound band playing again, right? Those people are all like in their 40s or whatever, right? It's like, as long as I think you go into it with expectations that it's going to be good, but maybe it'll be different, but it'll still be enjoyable. Then I don't know, why not? Like I can't wait to see Unwound. And there was somebody else that, I went to see Karate with my wife and Jake from Minus the Bear and his wife a while ago, and they were great. Like it was I was never a huge Karate fan, so it didn't mean as much to me. But my wife, like the look on her face when she saw like the songs that she loved, I was just like, okay, yes, like this is awesome. So
hmm Yeah, I mean, I love reunion tours. I mean, I get that, some people feel like they might damage a legacy or something, but I mean, I saw the Jehu reunion and it was awesome and they
oh
broke.
damn it.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But what
Where was it in New York?
no, so I saw them at Riot Fest
Oh, okay.
and I might have seen them at, I can't remember if they played now. I want to like look it up real quick. Did they play? I'll have to edit this so it sounds better. Yeah, I saw them at Wrecking Ball in Atlanta also.
Okay. Yeah, because
Um,
it was so frustrating because Minus the Bear was on tour, and we were we were playing in Spokane, like
mhm.
5 hours away from Seattle at the Showbox the day the show happened. And I was just like, my wife got me a shirt, but it was like, I mean, thanks for the shirt, but like, you
Right.
know,
Well, hopefully they come back again.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, those guys are always doing something.
Well,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
he's always got his hands in something.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you would like, they broke up well before I was sort of old enough to have known them. If you would have ever told me when I was first getting into their music, like you might see this band in 20 years, I'd be like, that's not possible. You know,
Right, right,
they're
right.
broken up. They're in other bands now. What do you mean? You know, like,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, I think it's like, you know, for me a lot, and I'm sure other people feel the same. Like, it's not even just nostalgia. You know, it's like it's seeing bands you couldn't have seen.
Hmm. No,
Um,
totally. Well, because
yeah.
when Jehu came through when I first started listening to them, I was like 19, and they only played, at like the Crocodile in Seattle, which was like 21 plus. So I was just like shit out of luck because I wasn't old enough to get in. And so yeah, I totally like. Actually, remember seeing Brian and I went to go see Rocket from the Crypt at the old Firehouse, which is an all ages venue, and it was amazing. This was like back on the Scream Dracula Scream tour. And the next day they were playing the Crocodile, and we wanted to go, so we tried to sneak in. We tried to get in, got turned away, but then we saw John Reese and somebody else from Jehu coming off their bus, and I was like, "Oh, you were great last night. Like, is there another?" This was at a Rocket from the Crypt show, right? And I'm like, "Is there another Jehu album ever coming out?" And he was obviously like not excited about my question. He was like, "Yeah, it's done recorded. It's called Guitarmonies." And then they walked away, and I was like, "Okay." And then I thought there was going to be another Jehu record, and there wasn't.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Anyway,
That's an amazing story.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and like you know, it's and Ju too, like a band like them, or Botch, like you had mentioned earlier, like Botch got bigger after you broke up. Like there's all these people I think who found Botch post breakup, and
Oh,
like
sure.
yeah, and you know you Botch has been cited as an influential band for like three different generations now. I feel like, you know, there was like when like the whole big metalcore boom in the early 2000s happened, you read old reviews and it's like, oh, this band's copying Botch. And then now it's like there's this whole new generation of young, I don't know if you have checked out the sort of younger metalcore bands, but like there are a lot of bands who were like in their early 20s and they're just like, you know, We Are the Romans is like what we strive to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a little removed from that scene at the moment, but I mean, it's so flattering when people say stuff like that, because you like, to your point, 20 years ago, you couldn't imagine, saying like, I'm going to see Jehu in 20 years. Like, I couldn't imagine when we were writing that record that anyone would give a shit like the following year, let alone like 23 years later. You know what I mean? Like it's super flattering. And, going back to the video, like I was so, like the day it came out, like this song, I was like, I think people are going to like this. And I was like, but the internet's totally going to like shit all over it. And then the internet didn't shit all over it as much as I thought. Like the internet was actually like fairly kind. And then I went to Lamb Goat and I was like, what does Lamb Goat have to say? And then I was
Oh
like, I'm
no,
leaving.
that's first mistake.
I was like, I'm leaving. Get out
Oh
of here,
man.
comment section.
Yeah, no, it's like one of the meanest comment sections. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, like on at least the people I follow on Twitter are a lot of them are people who like love Botch, and the excitement was so tangible. Like even just the song existing, and then the fact that like it rocks. You know, it's like how could you be anything besides excited?
Well, yeah, I was super thankful and grateful that we did it, and people it was received well. So
So I guess I just have to ask, not to keep prying about the reunion stuff, but outside of I guess your own personal closure, do you hear things like, "Oh wow, there are these young kids who maybe were born after Where the Romans came out, they want to see us"? Like, is there any part of you that's like, "I want to give them that"?
oh man, I mean, you make me feel bad.
No, I don't mean to. I'm sorry.
um, I mean, I think I think the music speaks for itself, and there was a lot of like time and place things with Botch and the performance and the energy that was involved. So I, you know, like I never got to see like Black Sabbath in the heyday or whatever. It's like I don't know. Like it's super flattering, but I don't know. That's a really tough question to answer because it's I'm super appreciative that people still love it and it's still an influential record of folks. But it's like just such a different time now. I don't know that would come across the way we wanted it to. Like if something were to happen, I don't. I wouldn't want to sully the legacy of the live thing. You know what I mean?
I get that for sure, and it's very like physical music and
Yeah, yeah. Did
yeah.
you see us before?
No, I didn't know your music until Minus the Bear and heard
Oh,
Botch
okay.
after.
Right, right, right. Okay.
And I think I was probably like just a year or two too young to like I maybe could have caught the final Botch tour if I
Right,
had
right,
like an
right.
older friend who dragged me or
Who dragged
something.
you?
But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And actually, on that note, I want to talk about Minus the Bear too. We have the 20th anniversary of Highly Refined Pirates coming up. Um, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about that record.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
So you're so when you so Botch's final show was only a few months before Highly Refined came out. I think you already had put out the first EP before Botch broke up.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that
Um,
was that because that was in because our our the first Minus the Bear show was like 2 or 3 days after 9/11. So that was like and that's right when the EP came out. So it was September of '01.
hmm So how did you sort of like come out of this super heavy band and then kind of get inspired to form this lighter, dancier, whatever you might describe Minus the Bear as kind of band?
Sure, sure. Um, well, I think we were, in Botch, when we were on van rides and stuff, we had such an eclectic like playlist of like, well, tapes or CDs or whatever that we would throw in, right? And like, I think we all, after touring for a while with Botch, just got so tired of like all the traditional like metal hardcore bands that we would see every night. So as soon as we got in the van, it was like, here's Built to Spill, or here's a Modest Mouse record, or here's here's like Don Caballero. Wow, listen to this musicianship, but it's like totally not like traditional metal. And I think we were all kind of like, I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like I was done with Botch because we'd been trying to write a follow up to Romans, and we weren't writing anything really good. What was good became Anthology of Dead Ends, but we wrote for so long to come up with the songs that made it on Anthology of Dead Ends. I think you know I was just tired of playing heavy music at the time, and I wanted to do something different with all these other influences that I was like really having fun exploring. Whether that was like Daft Punk, or or like back to Don Caballero or any of those other things. Um, it was just like I was just ready to move on, and so I forget what was your question. How did Minus the Bear come?
Oh yeah, I was asking like I guess what like inspired you to, leave heavy music behind and
Right,
start
right. Oh,
making
sure.
the yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like a way to like write songs and still have it be like riff based, but also have a technical element to it, right? Like interpersonal relationships within Minus the Bear weren't like super great at that point either. I think we were all a little frustrated with the writing and just like, you know, at that point, we would tour and come back, and like the shows weren't ever very good, right? I mean, there were only a handful of tours where the shows were pretty decent, and so I think I just wanted to just do something completely different, and I met I'd played with Kill Sadie, so I knew Aaron really well. Jake I'd known forever from the Seattle music scene. Like he recorded the very first Botch 7-inch at his parents' house.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was just one of those times where it was like, hey, let's start a band. And Minus the Bear didn't really start with a intent on being a full-time band, but as soon as like we got going and realized how much fun we were having, it just kind of like clicked, and that kind of just became the priority for me. I
Mhm.
mean, especially considering that the Botch stuff was just frustrating for everyone involved at that point.
For sure. So Highly Refined Pirates, I mean it's your first record again. The EP had already been out, but I feel like, for I mean a debut record, like it's at this point I would say like such a classic, and it's home to so many songs that fans have probably, requested at every single tour.
Yeah, thank you.
Like what I don't know, like what sort of went into writing that record? Like, what was sort of driving the direction of those songs?
Um, let's see. What went into writing that record? I mean, that was a lot of it's always I've always been fascinated by drummers, and so whenever I go see a show, I'm normally not even watching the guitar player. I'm only watching the drummer. I just love watching drummers, and so to go from Tim, who's a fantastic, incredible, like metal mathy drummer, to go to the complete opposite, but still super inspiring side of like Aaron, who has a really strong hip hop R&B like dance influence. um, to write with Aaron for Pirates was just like I think the world kind of just opened up, and we were both just like completely in sync with music that we loved at the time and our influences at the time. Um, and it was just really fun. Like Minus the Bear was a party band, right? Like it started off because we met in a bar. We ended up like just practicing at night, just like having beers and having a good time, and just like it was about having fun. Um and I think you can hear that in the music, but it was just such a different experience than writing in than writing in Botch. And the intent was different because we weren't trying to write these heavy, like aggressive, just like earth shattering songs, that you really wanted to just like see people go nuts to. It was like about more songwriting, I suppose. I don't know if I can say that because there was songwriting was important in Minus the Bear too, but it was just a different kind of everything. It was kind of like I got to flip everything on its head, and it was just super fun to wake up in a different world and have all those new people there to explore it with.
Yeah. Yeah, and even like in Jake's lyrics, where it's just like songs about drinking and like
Oh yeah,
hanging out with friends. Like
yeah,
it's
and
like,
just like traveling and like
yeah.
going here or there and like
Hmm.
having cigarettes on the beach or doing what what I mean, like any of this stuff, right? It's like, I mean, Jake's lyrics are so wonderful. I won't just even say on that record, but that record, I mean, obviously has some classic lines like, Absinthe Party is just like such an amazing vocal entrance narrative story. You know what I mean? Like you can, like
Totally.
when you listen to that song, you just feel like you're with him, like on the beach in the Mediterranean, right? Like to quote the
Yeah.
lyrics, it's like, it takes you there. And I mean, I know that's, maybe it's cool that it takes other people there besides just me being a guy in the band that was there since the inception of the song. It's cool when you can see a song transport people to this other place that either that's either in their head or they've had so many experiences while listening to that song that it's you know just takes them to that moment. Like we've had so many people be like, "Can you play Absinthe Party while we walk down the aisle together?" Or
Hmm.
like we walk down the aisle. Is there like a version of blah 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 we can play? And it's like, thank you, but no, we're not going to play your wedding.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean Jake's lyrics are so vivid. Like, I mean, even one
Absolutely.
of the like big ones for me is like "Into the Mirror." It's like I just
Oh, sure.
every time I hear that song, I feel like I just paint like a movie in my head of like what's happening, like as he's describing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just like yeah, and it's so like he's funny, he's like casual, but then it's like also deep and like lyrical and poetic too. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
all this that's what's fun about Jake, and his like delivery is sometimes so deadpan, but then like he can just not deadpan in a bad way, but you're right. Casual is a good word, or like low key. But then like when he goes for it, like in Spritz or like some of those other songs where it has like that big vocal moment, it's like you get the best of both worlds, which is really fun.
totally. Yeah, I've always like because I feel like the first couple Minus the Bear songs I heard, I'm like, oh, okay, so they have like sort of a quiet singer, and then yeah, you'd hear the songs where he belts in the chorus, and you're like, whoa,
Yeah, you're like, okay, all right,
yeah,
they went there. This is great.
yeah. So I actually just talking about Highly Refined Pirates. I recently on Brooklyn Vegan put that record on our list of the best like emo and post hardcore albums of 2002.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank
And
you.
oh yeah, no problem at all. And I had written in like the blurb, I was kind of like, yeah, I don't really know if this counts as emo and post hardcore, but also like I don't know what it counts as. Like it's dancey, it's poppy, it's like it came from that scene. I mean, all of the members pretty much had come from that scene.
Sure.
When you were like in the early days of Minus the Bear before the band was really established, I guess, where did you see yourselves fitting?
Oh, I know. I mean, that's such a interesting question because like we definitely didn't want to be part of like the the emo thing back then because that had so many trappings with like whether it was like the just the sound or the style or whatever, right? And like the post hardcore thing, like I wanted to get away from Botch, so the word hardcore scared me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Um, but we were also influenced by a lot of this indie stuff, but we weren't like indie enough. It's not like we're like Death Cab or like the Decemberists or
Hmm.
something. It's not like we're a super indie Pacific Northwest band. So I don't. I mean, so I feel like I don't know. Minus the Bear sort of existed in this weird nebulous region of like people that enjoyed interesting instrumentation, but then they also like loved the storytelling. And the technical playing or whatever was kind of like a bonus that like would bring in like more musicy geeky type folk. You know what I
Sure.
mean? So
Yeah.
it's hard. It like I don't like when you wrote that. Like I read it, I was like, yeah. I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head. Like hit the nail on the head. It doesn't necessarily fit into any of these things, but it's like a part of it in some weird way. But I don't think you could really classify it as like early 2000s emo, right? Like no one would
Sure.
say that because it's not like my chem or whatever that thing really is.
Right. Like I would
Or
never say to somebody, "Oh, Minus the Bear is an emo band," but
right,
if someone liked emo, especially if they liked maybe the more mathy, like Mike Kinsella kind of emo, I'd be like, "Oh, well,
sure,
Minus the Bear is sort of they're like the Pacific Northwest version.
yeah, yeah,
They have
yeah,
the mathiness too.
exactly. Because
Yeah.
we loved a lot of that Chicago stuff,
Hmm.
and it's funny because like a lot of people back years ago would say that Minus the Bear was like a kind of like a gateway band for them for a lot of things. Or maybe it was, I mean, because we did like, we opened for Thursday and like their crowd was amazing. Like we got so many fans from playing, from opening for Thursday. They were just really receptive. I think we kind of like, same with like when we did Stray Light. Who else do we do some support tours with? Where it was like those fans were like very willing to hear new stuff, and we were able to like gain those fans really easily, and it was really cool to see that happen. God, there was somebody else besides Thursday and Stray Light that we toured with that was a similar thing. But anyway, yeah, but like in those kind of like in that emo world, like our booking agent at the time was like, "Will you guys ever play Warp Tour?" And we were like, "No, we don't want to, we don't want to play Warp Tour," because I think that was like that was our way of not of being independent from getting being lumped in with those with with like that genre or whatever.
Sure.
Um, but if we had done Warp Tour, I think we would have like gotten so many more fans, and maybe the band would have been bigger in the end. Just based on what happened at Thursday with the Thursday tour, or any of that other stuff. So maybe we should have one time, but at that point, it would just seem like such a I don't know. We were so fiercely independent. Like we're doing our own thing. We're going to do it our way. We don't want to do Warp Tour, and you know what? Like it worked out just fine.
Yeah, and I think also people respect that,
Sure.
like it's part of the appeal that you could like flirt with that stuff, but we're independent of it. I think that was clear to most Minus the Bear fans.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Did you ever sort of, I mean, obviously, like, I guess the emo scene kind of welcomed Minus the Bear. Did you ever feel like you kind of wished maybe the indie scene did too?
I mean, it would have been. I mean, sure, it would have been nice to feel more embraced, especially by like the Pacific Northwest traditional kind of like indie scene, which I thought maybe would have would have been the case. But I think we were just you know I don't know. I don't think we had like the vibe. Maybe it was like too fun and not somber enough. Like we weren't, you know what I mean? Like we weren't necessarily we weren't like crying next to the Pacific Ocean. You know what I mean? We were like partying in like foreign countries. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if maybe
Sure.
like the vibe didn't fit with like what people traditionally got out of like Decemberists or Death Cab or whatever. It's like there was like we didn't have that level of earnestness, I guess.
Hmm.
Um like we like to have a little more fun, I suppose.
Well, I feel like, and I don't really know how this stuff happens, like why something is perceived one way versus another. But I also feel like, you guys, like sound wise, overlap with a lot of the like New York dance punk stuff. Like, I
Oh,
mean, I could
totally.
have easily seen like a Yeah Yeahs or Interpol fan like latching on to Minus the Bear, but I just like maybe it just wasn't presented to them in that way, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if that. I don't know why that was either, because there's certainly like the Rapture or any, well, yeah, like yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeahs or those types of bands or whatever. It seems like it would have, there could have been some crossover, but um, I also don't think we had that level of attitude, right? Like that whole scene seemed like it was very. I don't think we were cool enough for them. Like I don't that, which is why we didn't like fit with. We didn't fit. We weren't cool enough for them, and we were too different than these Pacific Northwest indie rockers. And like, yeah, I don't. It's a weird, and the emo thing. Like we didn't do that. So it was kind of this like weird Venn diagram of like, if you're into this and this and this, we're like this tiny little thing in the middle, right?
right. Those are always the exciting bands, though.
Right, right.
Um,
You're right. They are exciting bands.
do you feel like maybe some of that, I guess, cross pollination stuff was just had anything to do with the way the sort of Pacific Northwest scene worked? Like, I mean, even um, like Jake was in Sharks Keep Moving, and I think wasn't like Morgan from the Blood Brothers in that band for a second,
He
and then
was,
like
yeah.
and then the Blood Brothers were nothing like Sharks Keep Moving, but it's like all these, it's just these bands all have, I guess, I don't know, some type of mentality that ties them together, even if the sound doesn't. Would you say that was part at all of maybe the vibe?
Uh, I suppose, yeah. It's kind of hard for me to. It's kind of hard to answer that question. Um, I mean, yeah. I don't know how to
That's
answer
okay.
that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah,
Well, I guess maybe another way to word it, just before we move on, is
sure.
would you say the Pacific Northwest scene inspired you? How would you say that being in that scene inspired you as a musician?
Oh, yeah. I mean, how did it inspire? I mean, well, the great thing about the Pacific Northwest scene is just like the diversity, kind of, that maybe you just were touching on, between like Sharks and Blood Brothers, and then you have like any of like the K or KRS artists, like Carp, that's heavy, but it's not like hardcore. You know what I mean? And then you have Unwound, which is like aggressive, but still kind of indie. There's like all these like, it's like such a breeding ground for musicians, because of like all the, venues, the labels, the weather sucks. So you're always inside playing an instrument. Um, and so I think always there's been like this sort of like, I don't know, like hugely influential artists that kind of have their own sound, which comes from, that's just the legacy of the region, I guess, is just people bringing different influences together to make something unique and their own. So I don't know. I mean, it was such a fun place to grow up, seeing shows, because I would always go to, in high school, we'd always go up to the Velvet Elvis, and which is like an underground kind of like arts venue that was like $5, and it's all ages or whatever. And one day you'd see, like Undertow there, and the next, a hardcore Seattle band, and then it was like Sunny Day would play there, and then the next day it's, like uh Unwound would play there. I mean, it was just like such, and regardless of who was playing, we always just went to the show, right? It was like, it's not like we were looking to see a hardcore band or whatever. It was just like, this is a great venue. There's going to be all kinds of awesome music coming through. Let's just go and see the shows. So I think it was just being open to hearing stuff, which kind of like led to both Minus the Bear and Botch being what they are.
For sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think. Um, Now, so like Highly Refined Pirates and the Botch records, I feel like this is stuff maybe you had written as maybe a Pacific Northwest band. But Menos Celoso, I mean, down to the name, was a lot of inspiration came from that Spain tour, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you sort of like, how did sort of going overseas and like opening yourself up to that culture and that world and then taking it to the music sort of differ from making a record like Highly Refined Pirates?
Right. Well, on this, like on the, a lot of it's funny because a lot of the, when we went on that first Spain tour, we had like maybe 3 or 4 songs that ended up on the album, like finished, like we were playing. Like I know Hooray, which ended up, which is about a snow day in Seattle, ended up on Oso. But then that song or that album it didn't have a title till we were in Spain, and we were like, let's just, we couldn't come up with anything. We were loving our time in Spain. The food was great. The shows were great. The people were amazing. Like, we'd never been as minus the bear on, outside of the US or Canada. Right. So this was just like, um, super eye opening, and everyone was having such a great time. We were like, we got to name this record. We got to name this record. What should it be? And then I think I said something like, we should just name it Minus the Bear, but in Spanish, like a self-titled record. And then it was like, oh my God, how do we do that? And then it just, and then a lot of times with album titles and stuff, once you get the name, everything just kind of like clicks and falls into place. And I know that informed a lot of Jake's lyrics. But I think he would have written quite a few of those lyrics without having that name. Just that trip was so, I don't know, just so monumental for all of us. Because as a on subsequent tours we never spent that much time in Spain, but for some reason this was just a tour of Spain, and so we played like 7 shows in all these towns and cities, and then when we would go back, it would just be like you would play Barcelona or Madrid or something like that, right? But I think seeing the countryside and kind of like traveling to the shows and stopping to eat here and have like your grilled fish that just come out of the sea, like while you're driving in some crazy van, and was just awesome. So yeah, that record, God, I don't know, it's either that or Planet of Ice has got to be like my number one Minus the Bear record. But just in terms of like tour memories, that's like probably one of the highlights of the MTV tours for sure.
What's your favorite Minus the Bear song?
Oh, got to play live drilling is probably one of my favorites. And to listen, I mean, I think that just got so much cool. I mean, guitar wise, it's just really fun because it's got like the tappy riffs. It's got the big, like traditional strummed riffs. It's got sampling. It's just really fun to play. Like, that's probably like, where I feel like it was all firing on, all cylinders were firing together, and it was just really fun to play.
Mm-hmm. Just on kind of a similar note, like going back through all that old stuff for these videos you've been doing, like, have you kind of picked up a song that maybe the band hadn't played in a while before breaking up and been like, oh wow, like that riff's kind of cool?
No, but it is fun I mean, it's been really fun to go back, and a lot of them have been pretty easy, kind of like riding a bike, like you pick up the guitar and you have the intention of playing the song, and then it just kind of like happens, which is great. I will say that like playing Hooray, like those riffs, I was just like, oh man, I forgot how fun this song is. Like, we hadn't played that in a while. Like, I don't think we played that on the last tour. And it was just kind of like, man, like that riff is super fun to play. And then when it gets to the chorus, it's really fun. And then there's like this little weird section in the last chorus where everything kind of like switches, and there's like a different pattern for the guitar part. That one was pretty fun to do. I mean, they've all been fun to do. It's kind of like nice to go back and relearn your old stuff and mine it for inspiration. Like, not that I'm trying to like rip myself off or write more Minus the Bear or Botch songs, but it's been fun to like kind of like go back and, you know, there's all these memories attached to those songs, whether or not it's like recording or touring or even writing. Like, some of them I know exactly where I was when the riff happened. And some of them, it's like, this show was so incredible that, that will be, one of my main memories whenever I play the song or hear it from now on.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Does going back to them ever like remind you like, oh wow, like I was clearly into this artist at that point or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, Crisco Twister has so many, the first song off Pirates has like so many nods to like Daft Punk in it, and that second Daft Punk record, right? Like the fitter, better, faster, stronger song, or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many, like it was so fun writing that, because like we were so into that, Aaron and I, and like he was just doing all these bell like upbeat on the ands type things, and just like the big kick drum, and just like, I mean, I was immediately, I think after that, when I went back and listened to that record again, which I hadn't done in a while, and it was like, fuck yes, like
I've never made that connection before, but like now that you say it, I'm like listening in my head. I'm like, oh, it's totally influenced by that song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like there's so much Daft Punk in like some of those really early MTV songs. It's just like
Hmm.
we were trying to do like the dancey Daft Punk thing, but not as like DJs, right? It was like let's do it, which is kind of how the whole sampling thing with like the DO Force happened too. Like it was wanting to do some of that more electronic type music, but not be the dude with like headphones on, like mixing something or what I mean.
Yeah.
So
No, I
yeah,
mean, so one of the things that I was sort of eye opening to me from your videos is like, I mean, I've seen Minus the Bear live a number of times. I never really noticed that like Nights is basically all feet.
yeah. That one's pretty tough to do. Like if the sample isn't done correctly at the very beginning of the song, then the tempo will be so that then the drummer really has to work super hard to keep the tempo up because the loop gets out of time with itself or whatever. Um, but yeah, that one's. I mean, Nights is also a really fun one to play live. I mean, that bridge or the like the lead section right before the final chorus is just super fun to play. And yeah, that one is a lot of feet. That's probably the most one of the most like pedal intensive songs. But the whole point is to be like be unique with like how the riff is presented, and if that means that it's played so it's chopped up like that, I just that uniqueness is just like what's so fun about the song, right? Like just that little extra life that makes it that differentiates it from another artist's song.
Yeah, and it's cool you could do all this sort of like music geeky stuff while it's still being like pop songs. Like you could come to Minus the Bear with no interest in the sort of technicality angle and still just like get down with the choruses.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah, which was always kind of the idea, was to make it like accessible but also retain the technicality of it, for other people but also for ourselves, so that we're still challenged, we're still challenging ourselves, whether it was writing or playing or any of that stuff. Like yeah, the but also but to your point, yeah, like bringing people in with Jake's vocals and the hookiness of those, but also like the storytelling, and people want to know how it ends.
Yeah.
So
Now I know you were saying a bit earlier, like sometimes like finding the album title could almost inspire like that last direction of the record. I know you also did most of the band's artwork.
Mhm.
Um, with something like Planet of Ice, where the title and the art really play off of each other, did that sort of influence the direction of that record?
Well, we had that title really early on, and our friend Ryan Blinsky wanted to. We asked him to do that cover artwork because he's an animator and works on lots of video games. And so he was like, "Dude, I got this. I'll make this super, super epic like Planet of Ice artwork for you guys." Blah blah blah, and it turned out great. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was funny when we were writing those songs. Like everything was like the working song titles were just ice everything. It was, Ice Monster made it to a song title, but it was like Planet of Ice on Ice. Everything was like super cold, and like the song titles got so cheesy and terrible, like the working song titles.
Hmm.
But yeah, like everything we were like, how do we make this riff sound colder, or how do we make this, like it was half a joke, but then also kind of like, because we were thinking about it, like it sort of like funneled us to that direction. I mean, this is all during the same time where we're like discovering how much we really love like Yes and Pink Floyd and like King Crimson and like all these 70s concept records, which had the amazing artwork and just like the super cohesive vibe. So um it was fun to think of the record as like, not that we didn't do this before, but even more so just like an album as like one thing, as opposed to like 10 songs that maybe made up Oso or Pirates or whatever.
Sure.
We'd always thought about albums and sequencing and stuff like that, but this was really like the time where we were like, well, we're gonna have Ice Monster second, and it's gonna like have the glitch part that like is the same rhythm as the intro to Nights, and then have Nights start, and then we'll have Dr. Laling go into part two, and like it was all very orchestrated, which was really the super fun part about that record.
Hmm. And yeah, I mean, even like with all those prog influences you were talking about, like I feel like Planet of Ice is like very sci-fi, and I feel like
Sure.
progressive rock and sci-fi tend to sort of pair well together.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So something I was wondering, so Botch kind of, you talked about Botch's breakup a bit, like you were onto other things. You were also like, you know, earlier on in your career, like with Botch breaking up, you were able to start like this new band and take that so far. But Minus the Bear had been around for so long. Like, uh, what sort of inspired you to be like, all right, like we should really call it a day, like versus I don't know, just go on hiatus, take a break, see how you feel in 5 years.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I think I don't know that it's hard to say. I guess I think people were ready to move on. Like we were at that age where like people were having kids and families were becoming more important. And I think that some of the I don't know how do I word this? Like it. I think people's lives were just changing and people were moving in a different direction. And instead of like writing more or I think to Minus the Bear to continue, we would have needed to continue writing music, and I don't think people really wanted to continue writing music, right? Like I don't think Minus the Bear could just like continue touring and just do like anniversary tours of this record or that record. I just think it was time. Like 18 years is a long time, to be in a band, and we had I think written everything that we wanted to write, and we had toured so much, and we were happy with what we had done and contributed to the music scene, and we're happy with what we had done personally, that I think it was just a good way to go out. I will say that like the farewell tour was just so like overwhelming in terms of like gratitude. Like I couldn't have pictured a better way to like end a band. Like whereas Botch kind of ended while we were frustrated with each other, like Minus the Bear ended with all of us just like hugging it out, like being so thankful for each other's contributions to the band, and just the overwhelming amount of like love at the shows was awesome. I mean, it's so fun to like see people singing along, but when it's like the last song and there's like people crying and you're like, oh my god, it's like I mean, it's cheesy. It sounds so cheesy to fucking say that, but
No, it's not.
it's like music is like has such a strong connection with people that it's like it's an honor to be able to do that and like have people appreciate it and give that to them. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like, ending on that positive note, like it shows, like, I mean, I can't believe it's been 4 years since you broke up because, I mean, for one, there's been the live record, so that was only
right,
a
yeah,
year
yeah, yeah,
ago. But then
yep.
it's like the band's social media is still active, and like it doesn't feel yet. I almost like I'm like, is Midas Bear really gone? Like it's like it almost doesn't feel that way. But like like when versus Botch ending and being like you go in your separate directions, and at that point, of course, there was no social media account to be had, but like it feels like Minus the Bear, though it's over, it's like now there's this epilogue where like everyone can just still sort of cheerfully appreciate Minus the Bear, and it's
Yeah,
a
no, it's a it's a great feeling to have to go out like that and to like be able to do it the way you want, and not have to compromise on on how it ends. So yeah, I couldn't have written a better ending. So very very happy with that.
awesome. Now, was a solo record something you had always wanted to do, or did that sort of get sparked post breakup?
I mean, I always wanted to do. I think I always had it, like ideas of doing the solo record. During sound checks and stuff, I would always be writing things, and a lot of times it wouldn't fit, or maybe I knew that Minus Severe wasn't going to continue writing. So, at some point, I just, I love playing music. It's kind of like therapy for me. Sometimes it's like what I do. I need to be creative, or else I feel stifled and unhappy. And my wife and my kid will tell you that too. Like, go play music. Um, and so, it was just a cool opportunity for me to be able to, I don't know, collaborate with other folks and also just like learn so much. Like the best part about this whole process was just like setting up the studio, learning how to program drums, learning how to record, like working with my buddy Sam Bell, who did the Void's MTV record, and just not having like the pressure of a band dynamic with other people. Like it's totally different writing by yourself and doing a record by yourself than with a band. And there's pros and cons to each way. And sometimes it would be like, this is amazing, but I'm doing this by myself. And then other times it'd be like, fuck, this is so hard. Why is there no one else to like to help me out here? I could really use like some help figuring this thing out, or whether it's a logistical thing on the end of just like releasing the record itself. But it was just really fun to do, and the learning aspect of it was great. And then being able to, like doing the song with Jake was just so carefree and easy. Like I guess maybe part of the reason Minds the Bear broke up was there were so many expectations that maybe we put on ourselves, or we felt like they were there, but we could have talked about it and had them go away. Like, the touring cycle, the album cycle, the writing, that, all this stuff that's kind of like expected. When I sent him that song, it was just like, hey dude, want to sing on this? Sure, man. All right, let's go. I mean, it was very similar to sending it to Dave and the Botch guys. It was just like, there was no pressure. And I think you can hear that in the way the song turned out.
I think so.
But it's been really fun. And so, I'm continuing to write stuff now. I've got a song with Tim Kasher that'll be coming out in October. And then a remix that Alex from Minus the Bear is doing, and then a couple other new songs. So gonna like have a little EP that comes out next month. Kind of like a companion thing to the LP. So yeah, and then just continuing to write. So I don't know. This whole post Minus the Bear thing has been really interesting. Like I didn't know we were gonna get a Botch song out of it, and I didn't think I'd be collaborating with like some of my favorite people either. So it's kind of fun to just see where it takes me.
Do you have like other sort of guest vocalists that you hope to collaborate with down the line?
Oh sure, yeah. I mean, like I would love to like work with, like, who are some of the folks I've been thinking of? I mean, I would love to work with like any like the Fantagram people. Like we took them, we played a few shows with them back in, before they blew up. Like I don't know, maybe like 2009 or something like that. Like Sarah's got a great voice. We'd love to work with her. Let's see, there's a lot of people around town here. Like I'd love to work with like someone from the Blood Brothers. I think that would be super fun to do something like super aggro with them. Whether that's Jordan or Johnny or something like that. Let's see, who else. Well, I know that I'll just put this out there. I know Kimbra is a huge Botch fan. So if she hears the new Botch song and she's into it, Kimbra, let's like work on a song together.
Awesome. So I also wanted to ask, so Sam Bell produced this record and Voids, as you said. So I feel like, I guess he's kind of maybe become your new producer guy. You had worked with Matt Bayless for so long.
Yep.
How does working with Sam compare to working with Matt?
Well, it's two totally different contexts, right? I mean, like, plus the recording environment is so much different these days than it does when we were working with Matt. Like I remember, when we recorded Nervosa, we had for the whole record we had like 2 or 3 days to track everything and then 1 day to mix it, I think, right? And so like it was like just it was like insane the amount of shit that we did, with limited studio time. And now it's just like everything is just so wonderful and open ended, which sometimes it's better to not have as much time and to be forced into constraints or whatever. But I mean, they're both such incredibly skilled engineers and mixers. I would say that in working with Matt, I mean, he helped define like so many aspects of my career. So he's one of my best friends, and I'll be forever like grateful that we were able to meet up. Because like he was instrumental in making sure that the Minus the Bear or the Botch songs still sound good today, right? You go back and you listen to some records that were made in hardcore records from 99 or 98 or whatever, and they just don't hold up, unfortunately, because of the poor recordings, right? But Matt was there to like really make sure everything sounded great. And when he put it on today, it still is like, fuck, that sounds awesome. So and then throughout Minus the Bear, I mean, just being able to like experiment with us in the studio and help write some of the songs and have so many great production ideas. Yeah, I feel blessed to have been to work with Matt for as long as I have. And then Sam just has such like a unique producer vibe. Like I'm learning so much from him because he'll say, not just technically, but in terms of like what a song needs, like he's from Portsmouth, from the UK, right? And so he has all these like really silly British terms that he'll do, and there'll be lots of like, you need to do a doinky doinky doink, or a little clanky this, or there's like just a lot of like adjectives that I'm not used to hearing in a recording context that are really fun to like try to interpret. But he's also like super patient and just is a phenomenal like programmer in terms of like programming keys, or synths, or helping me with drum programming and all that stuff. So I'm so happy to have worked with both of them. They're wonderful dudes.
That's awesome. Is Sam still working on like the new stuff you've been doing too?
Yeah. He actually just sent me mixes that I'm going to listen to when we get off the call here, and I can't wait.
Nice. Well, on that note, do you have anything else you feel like you want to add or shout out?
No, I mean, like, the new EP should be out at the end of October, and I mean, nothing else really to add here. I'm just thankful that people are digging the new Botch song, and the internet was kind. As a 45-year-old man, I didn't want to be destroyed by a bunch of internet trolls for not living up to the expectations of the Botch legacy.
Well, thanks so much, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, so yeah, thanks again to David Knudson for coming on the show. If you haven't already, go check out that new Botch song, check out David's solo record, check out Minus the Bears live record from last year. All really good stuff. Stay tuned for what David has coming. I'm sure that's going to be great too. Whatever he's doing is always great stuff. Thanks again for listening. Subscribe to the Brooklyn Vegan podcast wherever you listen to podcasts for our next episode, and stay tuned for more.